open StreamYard first. Welcome to this week's How Change Changes You live podcast, live on LinkedIn, here on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. So trying to, say welcome to everybody whilst doing the tech in the background is always a challenge. But welcome to lovely Heather. I'm going to be asking Heather to introduce herself in a second. But for those who are joining us, just a reminder that the How Change Changes You podcast was all born out of the recognition that change can be pretty scary. And a lot of the time we see it as, anything from little changes to the bigger changes in life that can just really sideswipe us and turn our whole lives upside down. The main reason I'm having these conversations with lots of marvelous, beautiful, talented people like Heather is to illustrate that actually change can be a good thing, that endings can be the marker of new beginnings. And these conversations are designed for people to share their story, right? Because I don't think we talk about these, change stories enough to be able to inspire and give insights into, some of the more challenging parts of change, but actually signaling that there is hope, there is inspiration, and there's a lot of fodder for strength and greater resilience to be more agile to navigate future changes as well. So with that, I am going to hand you over to Heather. Heather, would you like to introduce yourself to the beautiful people watching?
Yeah, hi, I am Heather Moore from the Peacock and the Print. Do you know, it would help if I could say my business name, wouldn't it? Good start. From the Peacock and the Printmaker. Yeah. So I create gorgeous, vivid, mood-enhancing lino prints, mainly, as you can see, this way, that way, coastal related, because that's where my happy place is. But I also help nurture artistic talent in you guys. So up and coming artists who feel that they need some mentoring, some guidance to help them get started, or for more established people who want to scale their business and work on specific aspects with, someone else's viewpoint on, because more often than not, we just become a bit blind to everything, don't we? So it can be good to have someone else's eyes on your business.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And as we'll dive in to where or how you got to where you are now, because you're sat in your own studio, which actually, I think I mentioned this before we went on live, that many of the people I speak to, it's quite a cathartic experience, because how often do we actually reflect back on, just how far you've come and where you maybe were a few years ago to where you are today is such a great thing to do, right?
Yeah, I don't think we recognise it enough. I think that's one of the things that I've had to work on a lot since going through various life changes and things is being really proactive about recognizing achievements and growth, because you can just kind of take it for granted and not realize just how much you've moved forward.
Yeah, exactly. We can get very easily stuck into chase mode of just and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, without kind of taking stock, right? And stop and smell the roses for a little while and kind of go, actually, I've done good. Yeah, absolutely. So we obviously specifically are pointing towards your transition story that was quite significant in your adult life. Would you like to just share and give a bit of a summary of a few years ago, or wherever you want to start from?
Yeah. So I was a teacher for 17 years of my life. And when I say that, it always sort of blows my mind a little bit how long I actually did it for, because I don't feel that old. I'm coming up 40 this month, but I still feel the same as I did when I was 20. And yeah, so I was a primary teacher for 17 years. and had kind of a mixed relationship with that career. There were some things I absolutely adored about it, but there were other things that made me really ill. And yeah, I guess for a long time I thought I was the problem. And to some degree, you know, I had to make the changes and I had to recognize what the problems were. But yeah, 2 years ago, I left teaching earlier than I had intended to, because it was, for a while, it was the plan to move into my art business full time. I'd been running it for a few years, like on the side. But there was, you know, a major sort of, I don't suppose you would call it an incident, but there was a definite heightened level of stress, level of depression, I guess you would say, that sort of brought me to make that change a lot sooner. So yeah, I've been full-time in the art business for 2 years now. I've been in this studio since November, end of November. I mean, it feels like longer, but yeah, there've been some massive changes over the last couple of years. Some things I never really dreamt would happen, some mind-boggling stuff. But yeah, it's been the upheaval of the mindset stuff has been a lot bigger than I anticipated that would be. I thought it was going to be more of a, you know, logistical change. But no, there was a lot more to deal with than that.
I think that's really important, and we'll definitely unpack that, because I think for anyone listening, when you do go through like a change, you can rationalize and kind of go, oh well, I just need to make these action points, but actually 95% of our behavior is from our unconscious mind, and that's when we can get in our own way. So yeah, it makes total sense and it resonates. So if I was to ask you, if I went back to when you were in the midst of your teaching, and maybe at what point did you start to kind of go, I'm not sure?
Do you know what? Scarily, it was really early on.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
Like really early on. So for the first sort of year or so, I was in and out of temporary contracts because jobs in the Northwest, teaching wise, were pretty hard to come by. They were closing down a lot of schools, so it was quite difficult to find a teaching job. But you know, I enjoyed the short contracts that I did. I loved working with the kids. I had a teaching job with a reception class for a few months, and I absolutely adored them. They were wonderful. And then it came to a point where I was like, I need a stable job. Otherwise, me and my other half, who's now my husband, we're going to be living with my mum forever. This is not an ideal situation, wonderful as it was to have my dinner cooked all the time. So I took the plunge. I got in touch with an agency, and in less than a week I had a job down south. And I was very excited. This felt like, I've been working for this for so long. It was like 5 years of my life by this point. I'd done my degree. I'd put the hours in doing supply teaching. I finally had my own class. Oh my God, this class. It was in a real, I've never worked in an affluent area, shall we say, in teaching. I always worked with children with quite challenging backgrounds, and I actually really loved that because I felt like you saw more of an impact on their lives, and it wasn't just about their education, it was like the whole child. But this class was probably the most challenging class I'd ever had, and I was still in what was called my NQT year. I hadn't been fully signed off with that. There was virtually no support for me dealing with the challenging behaviours that I had. It was a year 6 class, and I had children offering to do me demonstrations during the sex ed, and children throwing furniture, running off when we had school trips, things like that. It was like really full on. I remember coming home after my first term of teaching that class and saying to my husband, boyfriend at the time, I just can't do this anymore. And I think that was like 2 years after I'd graduated. So, needed money, didn't know what else to do, kept going. And, it got better. I moved to different classes. I worked with a load of different children. And I made the assumption that this school that I was in was sort of an anomaly, that things would be better in a different place. Grass is greener. Moved to a different school down south, and it was a lot better. The management was completely different. The whole attitude was different because it was an infant school, and it was all about nurturing the whole child, and it was all the stuff I felt really passionate about. And that kind of kept me going for a while, to the point where I thought, I was applying for deputy headships and things like that, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to move up the ladder. It's going to be amazing. And then we moved up north, and because the plan was always to move up north, have a family here where we've got more support. Absolutely adore living up north. From that point of view, it just felt so right to be here, but things kind of didn't feel good job-wise anymore, and the pressure was massive, especially being that I wasn't a young teacher anymore. I was like 10 years into the job, so there were more expectations, and every year the government just sort of expected more of you, and rather than supporting us in that, leadership often would just like pass on that stress. And the attitude always seemed to be, and I think it's the same in nursing and things like that, you do this job because you care, therefore you should take this work home and finish it. You should, there were no boundaries respected. And I noticed that after I had my daughter and I started to put those boundaries in place and say, no, I'm not answering emails after this time. No, I'm not working on my days off because I went part-time. No, I'm not coming in like for the holidays and working while the kids aren't there. That my reputation amongst the leadership went down the toilet because I started saying no. So, and I felt really conflicted at that time, because on the one hand, I was looking after myself and I was putting myself and my family first. But on the other hand, I was not getting treated well. I was sort of not quite made out to be a troublemaker, but, there were definitely members of leadership, because this was a huge organization, that disliked my attitude to the point where I got hauled over the coals because I didn't answer an email in the summer holidays. And I was told that they expected more of me being in middle management, and that I should be setting the example, and that I was a bad example to other people. And that was like a kick in the stomach. I think that was the moment when I was like, right, this business has got to work because I need out. Because I thought, no, actually, I'm not a bad example. I work really hard. I'm good at my job. I do a lot for these children. And actually, the stuff that they were asking me for and expecting of me was not actually there to benefit the kids. It was ticking boxes for Ofsted. It was, the stuff that I just wasn't willing to prioritize, because that's not why I got into the job in the first place. But yeah, there was an incident at work where a member of staff had something really unfortunate happen to her, and she was not supported through it. And in fact, quite flippant statements were made about it in staff meetings where this member of staff was present. And I took it upon myself to try and support this person and to just help by making sure she kept records of things and she had unions involved and stuff like that. And that got really, really messy. And I didn't realize how much stress I'd put on myself with that, because it wasn't about me, it was about somebody else. So I didn't really think about how it was affecting me, to the point where I nearly keeled over in an assembly. And I thought, oh, I've just not had enough to eat today. My blood sugar's dipped or something. And it wasn't. Like, the Easter holidays were shortly after that, and I spent an entire week uncontrollably shaking. I didn't know what was going on with my body. I had no control of my body. I couldn't do anything. I spoke to the doctor and I got signed off work. And then a couple of days before I was due to go back, I think it was just before the half term, I got myself all worked up again about going back. I was actually scared to be back in the building because I didn't feel safe anymore. I didn't feel like I was ever going to be looked after. I know it sounds maybe it does sound daft, maybe it doesn't. I mean, safety is the absolute minimum, isn't it? I mean, we spent a few sessions looking at, in psychology at college, looking at Maslow's hierarchy with safety right at the bottom. And we went over it when we were doing our degree for teaching, and did various training throughout my 17 years as a teacher, and Maslow's hierarchy was always brought up. But it just became a picture. It was never, it was just a box to tick. Look, we've shown you this. Kids have to feel safe. Staff have to feel safe. This is how you keep yourself safe. I didn't feel it anymore. I didn't feel it. So my daughter found me shaking on the sofa and uncontrollably sobbing. And she said to me, I think she must have been 5 at the time, Mummy, I don't think you should go back to work.
Yeah, says it all. The wisdom of a 5-year-old.
And that was a bit of another sucker punch, because I was like, what am I doing? My daughter is seeing this and thinking that this is what jobs do to you. And no, I might not have been looking after myself very well, but I was damn sure that I wasn't going to let her think that that was acceptable.
Yeah.
Leaving my job put a lot of pressure on our family finances. Luckily, I had some savings and that did help. But obviously, it then put a lot of strain on my husband, who was, to all intents and purposes, the only person bringing in any stable money anymore. But I honestly believe, had I carried on, but I don't think I could. I think I went back for the last 2 weeks of term to say goodbye to the class, because I couldn't have cared less about anything else, because I felt completely abandoned. I went back to say goodbye to the children and make sure that they were okay, and I wasn't just another person disappearing out of their lives, because there's some children that have been through some rough stuff. I wanted to say goodbye properly, and to not just disappear, to do nice things with them at the end of their year, and just, let's leave it on a nice happy ending, at least for them, because that's important. Like, my mum was really worried about me. She didn't want me going back at all. But I said, I'm literally just going in for the kids. That's it. And I remember my manager a couple of days before the end of that school year, came in and asked me if I was nearly ready to wave my white flag.
That's an interesting phrase.
And I thought, do you
Choice
know
of
what?
phrase.
I don't regret leaving. This is so the right move, because you just don't get it.
I was going to say, I think it sounds like that comment helped you confirm that I'm not meant to be here. It's interesting just hearing you talk. I mean, both my parents were teachers. My mum specifically was a primary school teacher. So what you were talking about there in terms of, the government just sending it all through and it just passed on, and the pressure, the constant stress mode that you have to operate in, whilst especially if you are dealing with challenging children as well, through no fault of their own often.
Yeah.
When you look back at that, did you recognize that you were maybe burning out, or was that just where was your thought process?
I think for a long while, because I'd suffered with a period of depression a few years before I left teaching, and subsequent anxiety, to the point where during lockdown I was having massive panic attacks, and that was partly to do with the job, partly to do with the absolute madness of what was going on in the world. But I'd developed ways to manage that. But I think I just assumed that because I had been through a period of depression, which, to be honest, for about 10 years of my life, I assumed I was just a low mood person. And that was just me. And that I was always going to be sort of slightly numb. That was just the way I was meant to be, which luckily is not the case, thankfully. Moved through that. But I guess I just thought it was a bit more of that, and that it was something that I just needed to deal with. And I think I probably lasted longer because I had my business. I was part-time and I had my business half the week. My daughter was at school by this point, so that was like half a week where I was living my dream. And then I would just go in for like 2 or 3 days end of the week, do the teaching, earn the money, so it kind of kept me going. That like Monday to Wednesday I was an artist, and that was great. And that was a massive distraction. So I'm not sure I really noticed much of the burnout, other than like my sleeping got a lot worse. My husband will tell you I do not suffer with any issues with my sleeping anymore. I am head on pillow gone. But I used to have to do like 10 minutes of meditation, put my ocean sounds on, and then put in earplugs, eye mask on, and it would take me ages to get to sleep. And then like I'd wake up feeling rubbish. But I just thought, this is life. And until it wasn't. But
it's so interesting.
The tiredness was massive.
Right. The what was massive? Sorry. The tiredness.
It just was constant.
Yeah. I think as well, when you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we massively overlook, and I know I have, the importance of sleep. And I think all of these things, it's interesting you just kind of harken back to, the symptoms really of what stress can do to your physicality. So it's not just your mindset, obviously it affects it too. But a lot of what I talk about is PAIN stands for pay attention inside now. And I think a lot of the time when we are sent signals, right, it's trying to get our attention. And I think it speaks volumes, doesn't it, of how we are conditioned societally, as women, however you want to say, within teaching profession, that, well, this is just how it is. You have to just suck it up and you've just got to keep on going. And actually, I'm probably the problem. And, you know, there's a lot of like, oh, well, maybe I'm just a low mood person. And maybe I'm just, you know, all of these things that we rationalize just to be able to say, oh, I've got no choice. Yeah.
There was a lot of rationalizing it, because I was like, well, everyone else is managing. Everybody else is doing it. So-and-so is like, you know, an outstanding teacher and juggling parenthood and this, that, and the other. And I'm only here half the week. Why am I not managing it? And then, I guess actually there were quite a lot of headaches as well. And because I'd been teaching for so long, and I'd been coping with like headaches for so long, I just didn't think about the fact that actually I don't get them anymore.
Yeah, so it just gets to a familiar equals normal.
Yeah, exactly. That was my normal at the time. So I just didn't analyze it, because it had been like that for so long.
Yeah, so you just get, I suppose this is half of how we get institutionalized. And I can certainly remember, you know, not in a school setting, an education setting, but in a corporate setting where, well, that's just what you did. You handled the stress, you coped. But I think one thing, and this is why it's so important, and thank you, you know, for sharing where you were at this point, because to have your 5-year-old, you know, actually have that objective view and just kind of say, you know, it's like a wake-up call to kind of really look at what am I doing to myself and actually what impact is that having around me. It sounded like your transition was one of it came to a head and that you at least were able to drop to part-time and pursue your art. How's art for you personally? How has that kind of helped you and helped you through that time?
So for quite a long period of time, like especially when we lived with my mum, I was doing a master's in primary art education. So I was pursuing a lot of my interest in art, and that I was doing big projects, creating sculptures, having exhibitions, and absolutely loving that. But when we moved down south, we lived in a really tiny flat, and I just didn't have, I made the excuse that I didn't have space for any of it. So I kind of let go of the art. It just wasn't, you know, unless I was teaching an art lesson at school, it didn't happen. And then when we moved back up here, I didn't have the excuse of space anymore, but I was kind of scared to get back into it because I didn't know how to do it anymore. I had that sort of fear of the blank page. But then there was an Oosburn Open Studios. I think my daughter was about 1, maybe 2. And we went along, and I just got so excited. I was going around all these studios, and I got my sketchbooks out again, started, you know, just was doodling at first, but then it became this really cathartic sort of art therapy. And I had something for me again after becoming a mum, and, you know, I had a proper hobby, and it was really lovely because like I'd put my daughter down for a nap and I'd go and create some artwork, or you know, at night time I'd just nip in the kitchen, make a complete mess. My husband would go nuts, like there's ink on the dishes. And then eventually was like, I think we should convert the garage into a studio. And then I had a proper space, and friends and family started asking me to make commissioned bespoke pieces for them. I was like, oh, okay. And it sort of gradually turned into a business accidentally, but it's even now, the art is still a therapy for me. When I sit down and I do my carving, it's a nicely slow process. It's calm because of that. And then when I get the ink out and I get the colour going, I get really excited. I've got the music blaring. I'm like, oh. And then the work's up on the wall. And just walking into this studio in the morning and seeing all the colour around me of things that I've created, it's just amazing. So I think my husband was really worried that when I decided to turn it into a business, the sort of therapeutic element of it would go, because it, it's serious business now. But that's never happened. Like, the admin's not the most fun. It's sort of a necessary evil sometimes, but there's ways to, because the admin is linked to the sort of joy of the making, there's ways that and it's all on my terms as well. So the art therapy stays the art therapy, and the business is whatever I want it to be, because it's mine and I don't have to do it the way other people have said I have to. And that realization took a long time to get to, because I thought, right, I'm leaving teaching by September, I will totally know what I'm doing, I will be fully into the swing of things. I can't believe I even thought that. September came and I was like, oh, what do we do? Nobody's telling me what to do anymore. What shall I do today?
Yeah. No, you know what's amazing though, Heather, like when you're sharing this, I'm seeing a link, and I know as a fellow creative person that my background is doing a creative degree, but then kind of moving over into the more administrative side of things and project management, but still having this love and appreciation of art. That it's often, when I look back at my most stressful times, similar to yourself, that you deprioritize the very thing that actually nourishes you. But it's kind of almost like we're operating so much in our logical left brain that our right creative brain, which is just this self-expression. I mean, you talk about depression versus self-expression. I always think, is there a correlation there of your body is saying, or your soul, or whatever you believe, a part of you, your psyche is kind of saying, you've stopped feeding me, and so I'm gonna start to numb, because I am not fueled. I am not, that the very source of my nourishment you've removed and deprioritized because something else is more important. And that more important thing, yes, is paying the bills, but it's stressful and it's not fulfilling.
It is. And I think we can very much get into the sort of habit of doing the important stuff first, but actually, I mean, it's like anything. It's like the yoga that I do in the morning. It's like the running that I do 3 times a week in the morning. If I do those things first, I am more productive for the rest of the day, because I have set myself up to be in a good place. If I'm sat down to do a load of admin jobs and it's just not working, there is no point in me pushing through. Like a couple of days ago, I was getting so in my head about, various little things. And I thought, right, okay, I'm just going to shut the laptop. I'm going to go and put another layer on my print, because I'm not achieving anything. I'm winding myself up and I'm getting all, tense about something. And after I'd gone away and done the creative stuff, I realized that the stuff that I was worrying about actually wasn't a big deal. And actually, I didn't need to worry about it. It did me a lot of good to move away from it for about 40 minutes. And sometimes you realize, I don't actually need to do that job. I was just being busy. So
well, that's the other side.
It's good to do the creative stuff first. It's like I saw a reel on Instagram a couple of days ago, and someone had posted the artwork they were making with the question, people always ask me how I've got so much time to make art. And she said, I do the art first and the dishes come after. Everything gets done eventually. And I thought,
kind of like nature, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think this is what we talk about, isn't it? If we've got this an amount of time, and this is why we're all so beautifully different but irrevocably the same, is that what are you feeding yourself with? And what does that feed in you? Because a lot of the time, yes, you are putting energy out, but actually, are you getting any back? Because I think sometimes it can just feel so you're paying into something that you don't believe in, that you don't see the results of, and that don't feel nourishing to you. So then it just feels like an empty task almost. It's not nourishing. It's like eating candy floss and expecting to get some nutritional value from it. You just, you just won't. And you just get a sugar high, then a sugar crash, right? And then you just feel like the pits. I think it speaks volumes to your journey to kind of go like, and to ask the question of us all, how are we fueling ourselves in, there's always tasks we don't want to do, right? But where are we prioritizing our health in terms of what we really need to do? I did have a question in terms of when you look back at, Heather, when she was in the crux of her teaching, and certainly, when she was kind of questioning, this is unsustainable, what would Heather today like to say to Heather then?
I guess the big thing is listen to your intuition. I did a lot of squashing that voice down and feeling a bit selfish and ungrateful, because I thought, it took me a long time to get this job, and there's a lot of people that don't have secure jobs like me. All the stuff going around my head, like, who am I to not be happy in this secure, respectable job, blah blah blah. And I definitely feel that, and I sometimes need to remind myself now, listening to your intuition is hugely important, because everybody else is always going to have their opinion, and people are going to have their sensible suggestions. Oh, this is good money, you won't get this money elsewhere, what else would you do if you left, blah blah blah, you can't just quit your job and build a business because you've got a mortgage to pay. But look, I've still got a home, I've still got a roof over my head, and nothing catastrophic happened. So listen to your intuition, because your gut instinct is usually right. And I would rather follow my instinct and have something go wrong than ignore it and look back and think, oh, I should have done that, I should have listened to myself. Because I ignored it intuition for a long time.
What does intuition mean to you?
It's that sort of gut feeling of, when you ask yourself the question, what's the first thing that comes to your brain? What is your absolute sort of, it's not a knee-jerk reaction, because that's an altogether different thing, I think, but what is your
instinct?
What is your instinct? I mean, we're animals at the end of the day, aren't we?
Yeah, it's that inner knowing, and I think sometimes we can let this rule this. And I always say, I think the gut, you look at kids, right? They're all about gut instinct and expression. And yes, okay, this is formulating. So they're more about acting from the heart and the gut. And what we generally do as adults, or as we get into adulthood, is we shut this down, and then we shut this off. And then this becomes the leader. This becomes, it has to make sense, rational, logical sense. Whereas I think often our heart, gut, and head, they speak 3 different languages.
Definitely.
And we don't teach this, right? But a lot of the time when we think of creativity as a thing, it is about expansive self-expression, and that can be shared in all sorts of ways, not just in art, but in all different kinds of ways. So no, I love what you said there about it's tuning back into that inner knowing, and being and give yourself permission to do that, and not let these, what I call the shitty committee in your head, talk you out of it.
Yeah. Well, this is it. It's not just other people saying it. It's kind of like running through the pros and cons list in your head and having all these numbers pop up of I've got to pay this, that, and the other bill. And you think, well, actually, yeah, but if I keep going like this and I run myself into the ground and I become so ill that I can't physically work anymore, I definitely can't pay those bills.
Yeah. I think it was a saying, you've probably come across it before, that if you don't make time for your health, then your body will make you make time for your illness. And I think, when certainly, when we talk about burnout, certainly when I was on the path to burnout, I didn't know, I was just in coping mode. And it's not until, your body sends you panic attacks and shaking and all of these things. And even that, you're still going, no, I'm absolutely fine. No, I'll just breathe through this, or I'll just, do whatever.
I just need to put my dosage.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than seeing it as, it is a part of me that's trying to get my attention. And I just think that's so important. So in thinking that, when you look back, when you kind of step back from it and think, God, what has this whole experience strengthened in you? So getting through, obviously, and transitioning from teaching through your burnout to actually developing your passion project into a full-time business, what has that strengthened in you?
It's definitely strengthened my ability to listen to my intuition, to be more instinctive about things. And I'm a much more confident person than I ever was. I think outwardly people still thought I was confident when I was in my previous sort of iteration of me, but I never felt it. I think I just got really good at faking it, especially when people were coming into, the classroom and seeing what we were up to. So I think I have, and that's something I'm working on constantly, the sort of the confidence, the listening to my intuition, the whole mindset piece. But I'm aware of it. I work on it. It's a priority. It's the first thing I do when I come into the studio, is sit down and do my meditation, my journaling, all of those things, because I realize now that those are the things that set me up well for the day, the exercise, the mindset. And if I don't do them, I really feel it. And there's also, I'm very much working on being better at taking time off, because as a teacher, you had sort of enforced days of work, obviously. Although for a long time I wasn't very good at taking the holidays off. And now I am my own boss. I genuinely forget to take time off. I'm like, oh, this is going. And I'm loving it. I enjoy it. And then I'm like, why am I so tired? Oh, okay. So I'm starting to block out time off and make it a priority, and listen to the little voice in my head that is my friend Claire, who is forever reminding me that rest is productive.
Yes, that is such an important thing to say, and I think it bears repeating, because it resonates. I think especially if you are doing something you're passionate about, you can almost kind of convince yourself that, oh well, I'll just keep doing it because it's fueling me. But I think certainly when you look at creativity, neurologically, our brains need to have a total idle mode where we just, and actually that's a lot of the time where our ideas then come from, which is then stopping and having a break, right? So that's why we're not designed to be on all the time. And I think that's another important thing to say, that especially if you're running your own business, but whatever you're doing, if you're always expecting yourself to be on, and I think something else that you were saying before about, saying around you, oh, well, so-and-so seems to be, doing it just fine. And, you can get this nasty case of the shoulds.
Yeah.
That you should be happy and you should be coping and you should. And actually, again, it's back being radically honest with yourself to kind of go, no, actually, what do I need right now to operate at my best? And sometimes that is an extra couple of hours in bed. Sometimes it's a complete weekend off where you go and walk with your body. So yeah, no, I absolutely love that. So how has this strengthening of your connection with your inner voice, with your inner knowing, and the fact that you know, have followed it and have like turned down the volume on the shoulds, sounds like, and turned up the volume on the nourishment and the passion and the drive for what really lights you up. How is that, and this change experience and this whole transition you've been through, how does that influence how you live your life today?
I feel like I've got to this stage where I understand that my work, for want of a better word, and my life work in a balance. So my priority is my health and my family. So
Yes.
I build my work hours around that. I have boundaries, so if people want to book me out for a phone call or whatever, I've already blocked out time. So I've got my Tuesday and Thursday morning. I start later because I go for a run, so nobody can book me, and I can't be given the excuse of, oh, so and so's booked me for a call, I can't run today, because that comes first. I do all the school runs for my daughter, so after I pick her up from school, there is no work being done.
Yeah.
I should caveat that with, I am terrible at going back on Instagram, but nobody's perfect.
You're only human, Heather. You're only human.
I am. I'm only human, but my laptop stays at home. I don't bring any taskings home. My laptop stays in the studio. Sorry, I lock the studio. I get on the bus. I go home. I pick my daughter up, and then that's our time. And when I was teaching, she would go to an after-school club, and we'd pick her up like 5:30, shove some food in her, and we didn't really have any quality time until the weekend. Whereas now, I prioritize that quality time, and to the point where my husband's really jealous that I get all of this extra time with her. I mean, even some days we come in and she'll just be like, Mum, I'm going playing in my room, and I will just lie on the sofa and do a puzzle or read a book, and it's lovely. I just think, yeah, because this business is built to give me the life that I want. I am not flogging myself in order to do the job somebody else says I have to do. It's very much that sort of building the business that's fit for me and my family and my priorities.
I love that.
And you cannot do that when you're working for somebody else, certainly not in the context that I have.
Yeah. Well, like you say, I think when you've come from that flogging yourself and just, you know, they say jump, you say how high. You know, again, it's about listening to your body and, you know, finding some kind of right balance for you. And I think we're all, like I say, we all have different needs, but I think it is about being honest and hearing stories like yours, Heather, to actually illustrate and stop and think, like, you know, is this the life I want to live? Because if it's not, then you have the power to change it. I think sometimes when we're in burnout, we can feel powerless, which is a totally natural thing because you are literally drained of energy. You're trying to drive around your vehicle on the empty sign and you can't. It's not possible. And that's where, you know, your body will. You can try and outrun it. You probably won't for very long until it'll bring you down.
No, it gets you eventually if you don't stop.
Exactly. So if people want to come find you and speak to you, Heather, if there are teachers out there, if there is somebody who just love the creativity, really resonate with what you're saying, how can they work with you? What are some of the ways they can come contact you?
So my studio is always available for a visit. If you pop onto my website, there is a link on there for you to book yourself a private visit and come and chat to me and see what I do. I also sell my artwork on my website, but also if you first of all, if you've resonated with anything on this call, it doesn't matter who you are, and you want to just reach out, come send me a message either on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'm always happy to chat, and I'm pretty open about everything, as you've seen. You know, I don't really, there's not much I keep to myself. But also I love supporting artists who want to build their business, and I am launching a free masterclass on the 19th of July to support artists in pricing their artwork fairly so that they earn a proper profit and they don't fall into the trap of the starving artist stereotype, because I think that's often what scares people off from pursuing art as a passion, as a business, is that people assume that you just don't make any money, and that's not the case. But also from our workshops have finished now for the summer because, like I say, I'm prioritizing that time with my daughter. But September and October workshops are open for booking on my website. Also, if you want to come and fill up your cup and spend time being creative in my studio using all of the lovely tools and inks and getting guidance from me, it's
I love
it's
it.
a really lovely couple of hours to spend for yourself or to come along with a friend. I had a mother and daughter come a couple of months ago, and that was just beautiful to see them sharing that together. It was lovely.
Oh, I bet. I'm sure it's moments like that that you just think, yes, this is what I'm here to do.
Definitely. And that sort of, I mean, I get my teaching kick out of the workshops and the mentoring as well. I get that sort
Yes.
of the real sense of achievement from seeing other people develop. And I love my big thing about the workshops that I love is that they all start with the same starting point and create something totally different, and it's just so beautiful.
I love that so much. Yeah. No, if and if anyone's watching who maybe goes, oh, I don't know what this lino printing is, or
Yeah.
I'm not arty, go along and just tap into that right side of your brain, because it is absolutely therapeutic, and we
It is
all
very
do,
therapeutic.
in my opinion, need to kind of just express ourselves, even if it is just, it doesn't even have to look like anything, right? It can just be whatever comes out of you, whatever comes out of the process.
Exactly.
Oh,
It's
it's
like you
lovely.
say, it's
Beautiful.
just that sense of expression, and yeah, there's no rules basically.
Oh yeah,
It's
the
all
rule is
personal.
fun. Exactly. I love it. Well, thank you again, Heather, for sharing your story. If anybody wants to get in touch with Heather, we'll make sure all the links are below. And yeah, just, anything that resonated, do get in touch, do comment on this conversation. If you are sensing that you might be near burnout, do not suffer in silence. You're not alone. Reach out to people and get some support, because it's not worth you dragging yourself through what you're going through. You need to stop and recalibrate. That's the most important thing, right?
Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I shall let everybody go. Heather, you stay there, and we'll end the live. Thanks for joining us. Do catch the replay and share this with anyone who you think it would help. There we go. I think that's ended. Yeah, perfect. Hey.